ask that you would join us this afternoon in this seminar on a subject that you hold dear to your heart and you want all of us to understand. And Wayne and I thank you for the changes that you've made in our life and in our marriage, and we're happy to be able to share that with the people sitting here and whoever else will be watching. So we ask that you would inspire our speaking, that you would help us to be clear in what we say, that most of all you would inspire the hearing and help us all to take seriously the subject of marriage and how it impacts our society, our church, our families, everything around us, and how important it is to you. And we just ask all of this and declare it in and through the name of our Lord Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
I was going through my folders. I have tons of information that I collect. And I came across this small little paragraph I want to read to you. It was sent to me from Center for Arizona Policy. And think of, when I'm reading this, think of where we are today, 2017. This was written in 2009. So it was before all the changes have taken place in the laws of the land for marriage. The quote, to quote Time Magazine's cover story this week, "No other single force is causing as much measurable hardship in this country as the collapse of marriage. Many times when we see marriage discussed in the media, the reports are disheartening and discouraging. Even this week, we have yet another attack on the Federal Defense of Marriage Act launched by the state of Massachusetts." That was the beginning. That was the beginning of our end, you might say, here in this country. However, for once, it's nice to have a positive article to share from this week's Time magazine. The article is titled, "Is There Hope for the American Marriage?" and explains how we as a society have devalued marriage by making it all about fulfilling our own selfish desires and needs instead of about sacrificial love and raising the next generation. And when I read that part, it just reminded me of the Malachi scripture where God hates divorce and he is looking for that next generation to be godly seed. And you can't have that when marriages are being destroyed, and they're being destroyed on a daily basis just in our country as we speak. As a result, we have a "what have you done for me lately" mentality that causes so many marriages to end in heartbreaking divorce with absolutely devastating costs to our children. As Time magazine states, the fundamental question we must ask ourselves at the beginning of the century is this: what is the purpose of marriage? Is it simply an institution that has the capacity to increase the pleasure of the adults who enter into it? Or is marriage an institution that still holds to its old intention, which would be God's intention, and function to raise the next generation, to protect and teach it, to instill in it the habits of conduct and character that will ensure the generation's own safe passage into adulthood? So I want to go over some of the things that we spoke about. Some of you weren't here last week, and so it's online, but you got to do this funky wending your way through the internet to try to access it.
Until I get it repaired.
Yeah, it'll be repaired. But I just want to refresh that God is not happy with divorce, but he's not happy with emotional divorce either, because it's really the undermining of the family that we don't recognize that emotional divorce is taking place until it's too late, and then it just ends up in divorce. And that's Satan's, happy little trick that he plays on us. And I wanted to say to you, I didn't mention it last week, that we've painted a dire picture of where we were. And it was dire. But the unfortunate thing of it is we didn't know it was dire when we were going through it. So what I want to clarify to you was, if you were to see us at church, you would have thought we were just this wonderful family and wonderful couple. And even at home, like when I went to classes and we got to the emotional divorce part, I couldn't admit we were there because I didn't see that we were there. And that's what's so clever and horrible about it's almost like a sickness and a disease that takes over a family. I would have to say, for the 30 years that we were married, we were well suited for one another. We had similar likes and dislikes. We didn't argue about money. We didn't argue about child rearing, anything like that. But we carried our personal baggage into this relationship. I had my baggage and he had his baggage, and we didn't know how to sort through that baggage. We carried our temperaments, we carried our spiritual gift, we carried all these things that make up this entire human being into this relationship, and we had no tools in which to maneuver and manage ourselves in this situation. And here's the thing about Satan. Remember we talked about sinkholes and how you can see a sinkhole in the news and everybody says, oh my gosh, it happened all of a sudden, when in reality it didn't happen all of a sudden. And that's where our relationship was the sinkhole, and we hadn't quite gotten to the cascading of the dirt into a hole. The total collapse of the relationship. But what it was, and this is what I wanted to bring out, was busyness. We were busy raising kids. I was busy driving kids to and from school. We were YOU'd to death, basically. I mean, it was wonderful for our teens in the church to have the youth activities that they had, but it was constant activity that we were running helter-skelter all over the place trying to accommodate kids. Wayne was speaking, he was leading songs, I was entertaining, we had tons of people to our home. So on the surface, we not only looked good, but for the most part, we were pretty much enjoying our life. We were having people over, we had a large social circle, we went out to dinner, we went dancing, we did a lot of things. But see, here's the thing, I feel like Satan, he peers up from underneath that sinkhole at our life, and he goes, yeah, they're busy, so I can get the backhoe out and I can start undermining, and I'm going to dig that dirt out, dig that foundation out. And then, we wake up a little, maybe we read a book or something. I'm rattling his cage because I'm knowing something inside of me is missing. So then he peers up and it's like, oh, I have to get the shovel out because she's awake and aware and he's awake and aware. But as soon as we'd go back to, I'm driving kids and we're going to dinners and we got the feast and we're, all these activities we were doing, we weren't paying attention. We weren't paying attention to the foundation. And what I want to remind you also is about the human spirit. Everything starts in the spirit. We're going to have Pentecost tomorrow, and so it's God's spirit that links up with our human spirit is what grows us up internally. He's not going to grow us up physically. This body's already been set in motion to grow and mature physically. We now have to grow and mature emotionally and mentally, and the substance of who we are, which is residing inside what I call this earth suit. Or we talk about this earth suit in terms of being a tent come Feast of Tabernacles time. We talk about a temporary dwelling, and it's this tent. Because what God's trying to grow up is who we are inside. And so, you remember Wayne's bag? Well, Keith, you'll have to go see that online.
Scott was here either.
And
about the baggie?
not Scott.
I mean, Jason.
Jason. We're calling you Scott today. Anyways, Wayne had a plastic baggie and he put a $100 bill in to give as an example that the baggie isn't what has the value, it's what's inside the baggie that has the value. And we don't tend to look at ourselves this way, and it's this baggie that wears down and falls apart. We're always putting it together. We're running to the doctor with the chiropractor to put the bones all in alignment, and taking pills and medicines and whatever. That doesn't address the human spirit. That just only keeps this baggie or this earth suit functioning so it can carry who I am around in life. Well, Satan's not after your baggie. He's after the essence of who you are, your spirit, soul, and mind. And so who I am was suffering greatly because I did not feel loved or valued or wanted. I mean, these were all the things that I felt internally. And when I would say these things to Wayne, he couldn't understand what in the world I was talking about, because he was all about taking care of the earth suit. And you can see in society where people are craving love, they're craving to be known, they're struggling with depression, all of the things that go on the inside of you, but people tend to address what's going on in the inside with a physical solution, which usually is, well, I'm going to gamble to feel better, I'm going to drink alcohol to feel better, I'm going to take drugs to feel better. And now pharmaceutical drugs is on the rise with everyone taking these things so that you feel good. But the fact of the matter is that the essence of who you are is not being addressed. This is being medicated. This is being, we eat food, we gorge ourselves, and people, then they have bulimia and then anorexia, trying to gorge and then get rid of the food so that it's all about feeling better. But none of that's going to make who you are inside to feel better. And so we want to go on to talk about the human spirit and how it communicates. And this was the part that we really had to learn and think about and really study and understand, because God, there are scriptures in the Bible, we went over those scriptures last week, about the human spirit, and it's throughout the whole Bible. And I'm not going to go back over those scriptures, but there's a quote that I wanted to read here. It says, our capacity, and this is where we were lacking, we had an earth suit to earth suit relationship, and we were busy earth suits. We were running around doing all kinds of stuff. And myself, who I was inside, and I couldn't explain to him why I felt lonely, why I was depressed, why I felt empty. I mean, all of these words that I was trying to express, he didn't get, he didn't understand, because he was not functioning emotionally. As a woman, God made me to be relational, and I am emotional, and he was, and he'll explain that in a little bit here, trying to shut me down because he didn't know how to take care of those emotions. But it's so important to understand this, because we're supposed to be having spirit-to-spirit relationships. It's like when you come into a room of people, we start out the conversation on a very earth suit surface level. What do you do? How many children do you have? So forth and so on. But if you do that week after week after week, you're not getting in there. You're not getting deep. And so it has a tendency to make you feel that you don't know the person, and then they don't know me, type of a thing. And but I want to read this quote. Our capacity to have a spirit-to-spirit relationship with God, who is spirit, is actually demonstrated by whether or not we are capable of having a spirit-to-spirit relationship with other human beings, and marriage is the most demanding testing ground for spirit-to-spirit relationships in this world. And that's the absolute truth. This is the area that God is training us in, so that we then can have a spirit-to-spirit relationship with you, and then take it further than that when you have the resurrection of people coming, to live their life again on the planet Earth. How are we going to relate to them? They're coming with all their baggage, all of the things that had gone on in their life. They're being resurrected with that stuff. I'm not talking about people who are converted. I'm talking about those who are not. And so we have to know how to be able to address people in those situations. And if we can't do it here, I'm not going to be able to do it here, and ultimately further on up the road.
This is the testing ground right here, where
Right.
we can have a spirit-to-spirit relationship with each other,
Right.
which is the closest relationship. If we struggle here, there's no way we can have a spirit-to-spirit relationship with anybody else or with God. We can do a lot of religion, but that's not really what God is looking for. He's looking for a relationship, which is a spirit-to-spirit.
Yeah, I can do a
experience.
lot of list of do's and don'ts, but that's really what this baggie's doing, is the list of do's and don'ts. God is looking for a relationship where I'm meeting him at that place. And I didn't understand any of this. This was like a foreign language to my brain, because I'd never heard anything like this. And I was thinking about how words matter. We were talking about how words matter, how we use a word like, well, I'm going to church, because when we say the word church, we immediately picture a building, whether it's a Sabbath church or a Sunday church or whatever, whether it's got a cross, it doesn't have a cross. I'm going to church, and immediately in our mind, I'm going to this place, when in reality, God says the church is us. We're the church. We're the ecclesia. So words matter. And so we were talking about spiritual. If you are a spirit, you know, and you're human, the essence of who you are is spirit, and that we're supposed to be having a spiritual relationship, we tend to look at the word spiritual entirely different. Like we would say, the Pope is the spiritual leader of millions of Catholics in the world. So we look at the word spiritual, meaning a particular way of looking at that. Or, oh, she's so spiritual because what? I mean, she raises her hand in praise and worship, or she's so spiritual, or he's so spiritual because he's memorized the entire Bible or something like that. When in reality, I'm a spirit inside of me, inside of my earth suit, and that's what's being affected. And that's how he affected me for years, because he was not hurting my earth suit. He was taking care of that. I had shoes and I traveled and I ate well, but he was hurting who I am by never accepting who I was. I never accepting my temperament. We were so different that way. He's a phlegmatic and I'm a choleric, and he was constantly trying to change me and make me into him, instead of helping me.
Yeah.
Yes, his viewpoint of himself was right and I was wrong, and so we had to learn all of these things. So he's going to go on to talk about how the human spirit communicates, how we communicate, how we could recognize that in each other.
Yeah, when I first started taking these classes some 20 years ago, and I heard them talking about us having a human spirit, to me it sounded like heresy, because I'd never heard it before. And you know, even the truth, when you first hear it, sounds like heresy, because it's, you never heard it before. You know, how do you know they know what they're talking about? And I felt the same way myself when I first found out about the Sabbath and the holy days.
You're backing into the...
Or any of that stuff. And so I had to be taught what it means to have a human spirit. And so it was like a 6-week class. So we're going to try to go through some of that so you can at least get a glimpse of what we're talking about. The human spirit is what makes us who we are, like she was explaining. And that's what God is looking for. He's looking to resurrect and to make spirit beings into our human spirit, which is who we are. But we've not been taught about it. We don't know how it exists. How do you even recognize it? And so we had to learn how to recognize what the spirit looks like, because our human spirit doesn't have a voice. So God has designed a way that the human spirit can be recognized. It's kind of like the wind. When the wind blows, you can't see the wind, but you can see the effects of the wind. You can see the trees, the leaves blowing in the wind and that kind of thing. So you know there's something going on. Well, the same thing goes with human beings. When God made man, he made the human face to be the voice of the human spirit. Our faces make unbelievable different contortions. When our spirit is affected inside, it comes right out on our face. So our faces are kind of like the trees that are blowing in the wind, and a man has to learn how to recognize that. Now the wives know, the women know, because they're so relational. They'll walk into a room and they can see another lady's face and know exactly what's going on in that person without even asking any questions. They'll know that there's something going on. Well, a man doesn't recognize that at all, because we've never been taught that. And so we had to go through class to find out how to look at our wife's face and to see what her face is doing, because that would tell us there's something going on internally without her even saying a word. Because, you know, as men, we don't focus on the faces, we focus on words. You know, my wife's face could be so wrinkled up in a horrible state of panic. And if I asked her what's wrong and she said nothing,
Well, that's how you used to be.
yeah, I would say, okay, she's good to go, you know, because I'm not watching her face, I'm just hearing the words. And so as men, we have to learn how to do that. We've got a handout here. We're going to show you what those faces look like.
Okay, I'm going to turn my thing off so I'm not like,
Okay. Okay. I think you'll be amazed at how many different faces the human face can make. And there's no other creature that God has made that has a face that can do what the human face can do. You know, and God could have made it so that our faces never change, just like a snake or, you know, any of the animals you see out there that have a face. They don't have any expressions at all on their face. But a human has many, many, many different phases of looks that they can have. And we'll just take a little bit to go through this so that you can see what we're talking about. I wanted to put this on the screen, but I can't do it because of copyright laws, but we can walk through this. Let's look at the first one. Now, as you look at these, I want you to look at the actual the eyes, on what the eyes are doing and what the mouth is doing on each one of this. I mean, look at the word exhausted. I mean, you can take one look at that without even saying anything and know exactly what's on the face, just because of what the face is doing. And you look at confused, again, the eye, you know, one's high is a little bit higher than the other. Ecstatic, I mean, they're all teeth. Look at the one guilty. I mean, that's an amazing one. Look at what the eyes are doing. Look at what the mouth looks like. I mean, it's so obvious what the human spirit is doing with these kind of facial expressions. Look at suspicious. I mean, it tells a story by just looking at it. Look at angry. I mean, you can look at somebody and know what's going on in their human spirit just by the facial description there. You got a hysterical going on. You got frustrated. Again, look at the eyes. Look at the brow. Look at the forehead, the wrinkles that go on. I mean, that is telling a story by just looking at a face. Look at sad. Again, look at the eyes. Confident, big smile. Embarrassed. Happy. I mean, we all know what happy looks like. We see a lot of that. The mischievous. Now, mischievous looks kind of like anger does, but it's different, isn't it? It's got a different look in the eye. You can tell with the frown, the brow frowning, disgusted, frightened, and enraged. Look at enraged, and then go up and look what angry looks like. You'd think they both would look the same, but they're different, aren't they? The enraged, look at the eyes. Look at where the mouth is, the teeth. Now, these are things that we were taught to look at when we were looking at our wives. Look at the word ashamed and cautious and smug. Well, we've seen smug faces, haven't we? People that are very arrogant and self-assured, they walk around with that face. Depressed, again, look at the eyes. Overwhelmed, hopeful, you know, the eyes are looking up, got a smile on their face, and look at lonely. Again, the eyes and how the brow is formed. Look at love struck. Oh man, we're all love struck when we're out chasing our girlfriends, aren't we? This is the look on our face. They can do no wrong. Jealous, bored, surprised, anxious, shocked, and look at shy. I mean, that one is pretty obvious too. The eyes are real close together. There's no mouth movement at all. So what I had to do after this class is that they gave the men an assignment, and I'd like to pass on the assignment to you guys that are sitting here as well, is that when you go home, I want you to look at your wife. Look at her wife, look at her eyes, see her lips, what her lips are doing when she's talking to you, or even when you just walk in the house, because she doesn't even have to say anything. Just look at her eyes, and you can tell, once you get trained on this, exactly what is going on in her human spirit.
you know, it's been said that the eyes are the window to the soul. So you can read,
Yeah.
you can read a person's demeanor, what's going on inside, by what's going on in the face.
So when I'd come home from work and I'd say, how was your day today? I could see her face, once I'm trained to see it, that it was not a good day, but she would say, fine. You know, I used to just hear the word fine and say, okay, she's
Fine.
good. I don't have to get involved in this. But now she can't trick me anymore because I know I'm on to her because I've been trained to watch her face so that I can question her now when I see something that's going on and I can see something's bothering her and I question her and I can tell by her face whether she's going to tell me what she's going to say. In other words, I'm not going to pay any attention to the words, I'm looking at her face.
Well, in the past, he would say, how was your day, or is there something bothering you? Well, I didn't want to divulge anything because I didn't feel safe. And so I'd say, nothing. And he used to just go, oh, okay, nothing's great, you know, and he'd go on. And I felt very hurt because for some reason, I expected him to know, and he didn't know. He didn't understand any of that.
Another woman would know, but
Right.
a man is oblivious.
Well, we'd walk into restaurants, and I could scan the restaurant. Every woman does this. We can scan the restaurant, and you can see, oh, that they're dating because they're all, you know,
They're in ecstasy mode.
and
Yeah.
you know, the hunt is going on over there, or we can see someone's having a problem, or they're bored, or whatever is going on. You can see it. You can see it. And we were just at dinner when we were down in Mexico, and we were at a restaurant, and this couple walked in and they sat down. Oh boy. Now there would have been, years ago, Wayne wouldn't have paid any attention, but he was the one that called it to my attention. He goes, wow, there's something going on at that table because she's really icy. And when I looked over, it was like, oh yeah.
And
But
I felt so bad for the guy because you
Yes.
could tell he was totally confused. He didn't know what to do. He was just fumbling with himself.
he was trying to hold her hand.
Yeah, and of
she
course,
just was looking off
was-
like,
And oh boy, did she! What look did she have on her face? Well, she had a little enraged there for sure. And
she was just icy
oh,
cold. Icy
yeah,
cold.
icy cold. I mean, it was just crazy what was going on. But this is only half the problem men have, is that they're not trained to look at their wife's face and see what's going on and question what's going on in their face. The other part of it, if you turn the page over, this is about emotions. And this is what's called the emotional starter kit. You know, most men do not function in any of this. I mean, when I saw this list, I couldn't believe that there was that many emotions. As a man, I had maybe 4. I was either angry, I was happy, I was sad, or I was neutral. I had nothing going on. I mean, that was it. That's basically the only emotions I ever felt. So when I looked at this, I thought, that can't be. There can't be that many emotions that's going on in here. So God had to teach me how to feel emotions, because I didn't have any feelings. You know, as a man, we're shut down from just an early age. As young boys, we're taught, you know, don't cry, you know, suck it up, kid. You know, they were trying to toughen us up. So our emotions were shut down. So we don't feel basically hardly anything unless it's really traumatic. And so for me, God had to teach me as a man not only to look at her face so I could see what's going on in her spirit, but he also had to teach me what feelings feel like. Because you know, that's foreign to a man. He doesn't really have feelings. I know the ladies looking at us like, how can that be? But every man out here knows that feelings are just not something that most men can relate to.
Let me just say that when they passed this list out when we were in class, I looked at it and I refused to mark it and answer it. I couldn't go there because when I looked at it, in my mind, I had only felt all the negative feelings. And that was horrifying to me because, see, here we were living that life, that busy, busy life, and I didn't want to admit that we were on the precipice of total and complete disaster. And so if I marked this, I would then have to recognize that all the feelings I was feeling, they weren't the happy ones. They were all the sad ones. So I refused to do it. And I have my workbook from 4 years. And every year, the first year is completely blank. I refused to even do it. And it distressed me inside of my spirit. It distressed my soul. And it was like I had shared this example once before. It was like somebody had stuck a piece of wood in an old bog, you know, the old marsh and the bog where you see it in movies where it's all green and crusty. And so it was like somebody had stuck this wood in that bog, and it was now beginning to crack, and they were moving it around. And I was quite content, even though I had prayed for so many years for God to rescue me. I was actually quite content to stay where I was at because it was familiar and safe. And so now they're like, stir in that stew pot. And I was like, well, I'm not going there. And so I didn't fill it out. But the years thereafter, I began to fill it out. And this was one thing I want to just interject here because I didn't say it in the beginning. It's really hard for me to come and speak about this because I have to go find this girl that's 20 years ago. I got to go find her, and I'm not her anymore. And I have to go find this girl, and I have to literally resurrect her up, and I have to feel all those feelings that I had felt so that I can express that to you and help you to understand where I was and how I got there. And so when I have to go back, it's almost traumatizing to me to some degree because I have to go remember and I have to feel that again. And I'm not, to give you hope, like David Antian said today, to give you hope, it's like I was there, but I'm not there anymore. I've got to go back every time I do this and go find her. We discuss it. And sometimes it brings up old emotions, and it's like, and it makes me cry about that person that I was. But I'm not there anymore. I'm over here. And I haven't been there in 20 years because Wayne took seriously what we'd been taught and he applied it. Was it easy? No. And it wasn't easy for me either. But it was like we forged on, we believed that it was the truth, and we applied it, and it made a huge difference in our life. So I just wanted to say that I didn't fill this out the first year because I wasn't going to go there.
Well, I had to learn how to feel. And so God, because if I don't learn how to feel, then I'm going to be continually hurting my wife because I was saying things that are very hurtful.
Well,
and I'm not even knowing I'm being hurtful.
Well, he never hurt me physically, but he sure was stomping all over what was inside of me with words.
So God being faithful, he had to teach me how to feel. And so this was 20 years ago, but I got a call from my minister one time, and he said, I want you to come over to the house. I got something I want to talk to you about. So right away I got, ooh, what's this about? I mean, he's my authority. He's over me, and he wants to talk to me. Right away, my mind is spinning, trying to figure out, well, what did I do? So I get to the house, his house, and goes to the back room, and we sit down in his office, and I'm sitting there. I felt like a little kid, you know, in front of his, you know, what's going to happen here? And he says, I just want to talk to you. He says, I don't like your sermonettes. I don't like the way you do your sermonettes. I says, well, why? What am I doing? He says, I don't like your style. I don't like the way you use personal examples in your life on things that you're overcoming and using that as a story in your sermonettes. I don't like that. He says, I don't want you to do that anymore. People don't come to church to hear what you're struggling with. And he says, besides that, he says, you're looked at as one of the pillars in the church, and people don't want you standing up there talking about how you struggle with things. You're supposed to be the example. So I don't want you doing that anymore. And I didn't even know what to say at that point. And so then he goes on and he says, you know what? Another thing. He says, you're trying to usurp the sermon when you speak. I says, I'm trying to usurp this. What do you mean by that? You're trying to get the limelight on yourself instead of just warming up the audience for the main message, which was supposed to be the sermon. So you're not supposed to be talking about any of this stuff. So you need to stop that. I don't want you doing that anymore. You speak at my request. I can have you jerked off the schedule anytime I want because I have the authority to do that. He says, I want you speaking the way I want you to speak, which is I want you to do a difficult scripture and use 2 or 3 verses, and that's it. He says, I don't want you saying anything of any value, or I mean, he didn't say value, but anything that has any real meat to it. He said, the meat is for the sermon. And so I don't want you to stop that. I don't want you doing that anymore. And if you don't stop, then I'll have you removed. And, you know, I left there in shock. I didn't know what to even say or do. It was like he just crushed me. And so I got home, and my wife asked me, well, how did it go today? You know, how did it go? I said, well, it didn't go real well. I said, I feel like I've been kicked in the stomach. And she says, well, that doesn't tell me a whole lot. I says, well, I just, for a man, you know, I'm trying to explain what just happened and put it in words. It's like I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And so she says, well, pull out that emotional starter kit. Let's look at it and see if you can find something on there that maybe you can relate to. And I had one here that I had already checked. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, here it is. So I started looking at that, and I went down the list, and I said, okay, well, I felt angry. So I checked angry. And I went down some more, and I said, okay, I certainly felt dejected. He just told, you know, made me feel that for sure. And then he made me feel depressed. And then it made me feel disappointed, you know, like I wasn't doing a good job. And then he went down, I went down and I saw frustrated. He made me feel frustrated because I didn't know what to do about this. And then I went over to hurt. He certainly made me feel hurt. And then I went over and I felt rejected. And then I felt resentful. And then I felt wounded. And I was absolutely shocked that all this was in here, but I couldn't put any words to it because I'm a man. All I could feel was pain in my chest, felt like somebody had kicked me in the stomach. And so I had to put words to my feelings. And that's the first time I had ever done that. And it was a real eye-opener to me. So going through that, it made me feel all these things. And so my wife asked me, she says, well, how did that make you feel when he did this to you? I said, well, it just, you know, just crushed me and it made me feel all of these things.
He didn't like feeling them.
I didn't like feeling it.
He'd hidden and buried himself.
And then my wife said this to me. She says, you know what? You have made me feel every one of these things. And the things that you have said to me over the years, you've made me feel every one of these things that you checked. And she said, how did that make you feel? Because that's how you made me feel. And when I sat there and thought about that, I thought, oh, cow, man, I have made you feel that way because of what came out of my mouth? Because of words that I have said to you? I was absolutely devastated that I had made her feel like she was kicked in the stomach and all these other things. Because God had to take me to somebody who was above me in authority in order for him to affect me in that way. Well, our wives come to us because they look to us as their authority as well. We're over them. And so what we say and what comes out of our mouth is so important that we be careful what we say and how we say it to our wives, because we make them feel things that we never felt, you know. So it's something that I had to learn. And so when I get into conversations with my wife, I have to be very careful what comes out of my mouth, because I'm still learning that I have to be careful, because they're so relational that they take it so personally that it just crushes them. And so I'm learning how to do that.
Well, he was being criticized on a style. It's just his style of
Yeah.
speaking. It's his way of delivering a message. And someone in authority over him wasn't appreciating his style. Well, it was a good lesson. And this is all God, this is how God does it. He takes that physical activity and he slams it into the spirit so
Yeah.
that you can get the spiritual concept that
Yeah.
God's trying to teach us. But in all the time prior to us going to classes and learning all of this, he never liked my style. He didn't like me being choleric. He didn't like my spiritual gifting. He didn't like certain things I designed or painted, or I mean anything and everything that I did. It was about style. He
I didn't like her hairstyle.
He didn't like my
I didn't
hair.
like her dress because she wasn't looking like
He thought.
I thought she should look like, being I am a deacon in the church, and she shouldn't be wearing things that look so outlandish in bright colors and
Messy hair.
and
He likes smooth hair.
I like smooth hair. She's always liked this kind of hair,
Really?
wild and tossed, and because that's who she is. But so I was trying to mold her into something. The same thing the minister tried to do to me. I don't want you speaking like you speak. I want you to speak like
I
speak in a way we're taught to speak here, and you will follow this outline, and if you don't do it, off with the head. Well, I was doing the same thing to her.
And I couldn't explain to him how hurtful that was to me, and he just saw it purely from a mechanical, physical point of view. He didn't know I had a human spirit, so he was like tromping all over it. And the essence of who I was, all my talents, all of the things that God had given me in life and trained me in, and my spiritual gifting and my temperament, and I mean all of it, he didn't like. And so that left me with the feeling, he doesn't like me. So what do I do with somebody who says he loves me, but he doesn't like me? And so I then proceeded to try to change myself. And that didn't work because then you're not true to yourself. You're not true to the person that God created you to be. And it's very dissatisfying. And this is where these addictions come from. This is why people are medicating themselves, because of all the stuff that goes on inside of them from the time they're a child to the time they get to be an adult. This stuff is going on and seeping out on the outside, and people are trying to medicate that and do happy things. You can only have so many clothes and eat so many meals and drink so many drinks, and it will never solve this problem about who we are internally.
Well, I thought I'd learned my lesson and I was good to go, and hey, I got this under my belt, got it. Well, a couple of years later, we had another. I don't know why it always has to do with ministers, but I guess it's because they're an authority. So
You respected their
I respected what they had to say. Well, I had another little run-in with another minister and a new guy in town, and he was having some problems in the congregation. People were not liking him. He wasn't communicating. His sermons were dry, boring, and people were leaving because he was just, the guy should have never been a minister. He was one of these guys that had hands laid on him right out of college. He should have been something else, but not a minister. He had no people skills. I felt sorry for the guy because he was really a nice guy. He was just in a square peg in a round hole. And anyway, the deacons got together and they said, we got to do something with this guy. We got to help him out here, because if he continues the way he's doing, he's going to chase everybody out of the congregation. So they asked me, I don't know why me, but they asked me, would you be our voice for us? Would you take him aside and gently tell him what's going on so that we can maybe salvage this? So I invited the guy over to the house, and he was all happy to see me and wanted to know, what I wanted to talk about. And so I said, what I'm going to say is very hard for me, and I don't want to be hard. I'm here because I want to help. I don't want to be part of the problem. You've told us, deacons, that we are the eyes and the ears of the congregation, and when you hear something, you want us to come to you and tell you what you're hearing and seeing. So I'm doing exactly that today. And so I proceeded to tell him, you know, that the people weren't too happy with the way he did his sermons, and they didn't think he was personable, and a few things like that. And I could see his face change from Mr. Happy to, I mean, whoo, there was some pretty bad faces going on here. I thought, oh man, I'm in deep doo-doo right now. I don't know what's going to happen to me. So anyway, I saw what was coming, and he laid out. He says, you know what? He says, you're only one periscope, he said. I have a lot of people that like my sermons. I have a lot of people that like what I do. And and I think you're listening to the wrong people. And in fact, I think you're part of the problem. You know, you're the one that's causing this. You're the one that's churning this up. And he stomped out of the house and took me off the speaking schedule, took me off sermons. I mean, he burned the messenger. So anyway, after that meeting, again, I went to my wife. I says, man, that did not go well.
The handy-dandy emotional starter kit.
I says, man, he just tore into me and I feel horrible. She says, well, how's that make you feel? I said, oh, you know, where's my list? Oh yeah, I get my list out again. So I go through the list. She says, how did that make you feel when an authority did this to you? I says, well, I felt betrayed. I felt betrayed because I came to him with an open heart, a right heart, and as he turned on me, I felt betrayed. I feel that he sacrificed me to protect his own ego. I felt that my opinion had no value because it wasn't logical in his mind. It was no value at all. And after a very shallow apology, he tried to convince me that I was the problem. And when I told Claudia that, you know, what did she say? You have done the very same thing to me. You've made me feel the same way. You've made me feel betrayed. Because I came to you with an open heart and a hand and asked you to help me, and instead of me helping me, you betrayed me because you let me down. You came after me. You sacrificed me to protect your own ego. How many times I have done that to my wife, I can't even count. That I have sacrificed her to protect my ego so that she wouldn't make me feel bad. She says, you have made my opinion have no value either. And how many times did my wife come to me with an opinion, and because I didn't agree with it, and I couldn't see it from my own mind, my male mind, that I discredited her. And it was like the dollar bill thing we did here a couple of sessions ago. I refused to go on her side of the dollar bill and see what her perspective was. And there was times when I did a very shallow apology as well, when I tried to be righteous, you know, and said, well, dear, I'm sorry I did that to you. But it was shallow.
It was shallow because he was just sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
He didn't understand. He never understood what it felt like. But God then became faithful to me in helping him to understand what things felt like. And that's the value of faces.
And then I've tried many times and have reversed the tables when she's come to me and made it feel like she was the problem.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, many, many times. I was an expert at that, to be able to turn it around and make her feel like it was her problem. If you were just more converted, if you just did this more, and if you just did that more, I would have a whole different reaction. And I put the whole blame back on her shoulders. I mean, it's just, you know, looking back now, it embarrasses me because it was so shameful. Here I'm supposed to be the Christ-like leader in our family. I'm supposed to mirror Christ as the leader. And I wasn't doing that. I was destroying the family because of my ego, because of my pride, because of ignorance, because of not knowing how to look at her face and read her face, on how not knowing what feelings felt like. And so I had to do a whole 180-degree turn in our marriage and take marriage counseling or marriage training seriously. Because the way I was going with what I knew, I was destroying our relationship, destroying the relationship with my children.
Yep.
Yeah. I got one more short story about Justice, remember?
Yeah, go ahead.
This was, again, 15 or so, 20 years ago. There was a famous football player. He was called the Boz. I don't know if you remember him, but famous football player, and he used to cut shave these lines in the side of his head right here, across, and that was the craze. Every kid wanted to have that. Well, my son came home one day and had that on the side of his head. I tell you what, I went ballistic. How could you come home? What am I supposed to tell the people at church, that, you know, I'm a deacon and I'm supposed to be a leader, and you come walking in here with your head shaved like that? I said, you're embarrassing me. This is a shame. I mean, I just ran. Of course, he cried and ran in the bedroom, you know. And again, I felt righteous in my indignation that he had done something like that. And years went by.
Well, and I had said to him.
And you did.
I said, it's just a style. Styles come and go, hair grows, it's no big deal. But you're making this huge issue. But again, it was only his perspective mattered. Nobody else's perspective mattered. And he wouldn't hear me.
Yeah. Well, years later, when I learned what I had done to my son.
God gave you an opportunity. Another one of these wonderful, how does it feel, opportunities. Where he had to feel something.
Right. And so, because of that, I felt I needed to go back and repair with my son, who I had just crushed. You know, it was probably 10 years had gone by, and I just felt really I had to go repair that. And so I took my son aside, and I said, you remember when that happened? He said, yeah, I remember. I said, I just want to tell you, I'm so ashamed of myself. I should not have done that. I am so sorry that I did that to you. I was totally wrong. And if you can find it in your heart to forgive me, would you please forgive me for doing that to you? Well, he was very gracious, you know. He said, yeah, Daddy, come on, Dad, it's no big deal. It was a big deal. I needed to repair for that. And that's another thing that we have to do as husbands. Once we learn how to do this stuff, we have to go back to our wives, because they're holding on to a bunch of stuff that they've stuffed under the carpet for years and years and years. Now the carpet's got such a big lump in it. It was like you couldn't walk around it. It was so big. I've had to go back, and that's how we were able to restore our relationship. I had to go back and repair those things that I had done, the damage that I had done. But I couldn't do that until I'd learned these things, because I couldn't feel it. I didn't realize even what I was doing.
Well, it's not like he was this mean, horrible person. He was just uneducated and ignorant of all of this stuff. I mean, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just on a relationship level, on a marriage level, there was no example. There was not the right teaching, and so hence, we just thought we could be married and live our life and be
live
busy.
Happily ever after.
Be busy, busy, busy. And so in the meantime, Satan's, making a sinkhole. And it was just not his fault. It's not any of your fault. It's not any of our fault. We just don't know. We come up in a world and it's already going. And it's not going so well.
God says, my people are destroyed because of lack of knowledge. And that's exactly what we're doing. We've not been trained. Nobody's ever taken the time, at least in the areas that I've lived in, to really go into the depth of what is required in a marriage relationship. What is the responsibility of a wife? What's the responsibility of the husband? What's it mean to be a Christ-like leader in your family? I just didn't know any of that. And so I've had to go back and learn it. But I have to say that once we've learned it and I apply what we've learned, it's changed our life. I mean, we enjoy each other now. I mean, we're retired. I live with her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I like her. I enjoy her now. But there was 15, 20 years ago, I didn't even want to come home from work. You know, saying, oh, I got to listen to that bag again. You know, blah, 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 blah. Please, Christ, return. Quick. I can't do it anymore. So here we are 20 years later, and we're repaired, but we had to learn these things and apply it in our life. Look, we're way past where we need to be right now. But so we need to cut it off again. We've run out of time, but we've got, you know, can you believe it? We're about halfway through our series. So we've had 5, and I'm not sure how many more. My wife's health has not been real good, but we're going to try to keep going here. And I hope you guys are enjoying this. You're learning from it. We want to keep sharing this with you as we get the opportunity to. And so.
And what we're sharing here is just like this subject would take weeks of discussion, weeks of in-depth discussion. We're just giving you that overview, the tip of the iceberg overview, but it's so important, this subject of the human spirit. It really, really is.
Okay, so thanks for coming again, and we will.
Questions?
Any questions before we close up? Anything trigger some thoughts? You agree, disagree?
Oh, I wanted to say, I'm sorry, go ahead, Paulina.
I think that even if you are given the knowledge, or let's just say it's brought up to your attention, pride still gets in the way for a lot of men.
Yes. And we're going to talk about that in the next session, maybe, or the one after that, on how the ego, a man's ego, can be so destructive in a relationship, and why it has to be put to death. Cheryl?
I just remember when Terry finally realized that he couldn't inform me into who he was, that it was made a big change because it used to frustrate him that I wouldn't be exactly like him, that I wouldn't fold I'm exaggerating here, but fold my socks the same way as him, but that's not that big of a but just little things like that. And he finally realized that, and he even had a minister one time tell him that she goes, she's never going to be like that. And I think that finally kind of released him, because he felt like he kept having to
Fix you.
fix me.
Understand?
I'm not fixable. No.
Part of the man's education is to learn the difference and to accept the difference and work with the difference, because it's a good thing. It's not something that we need to change. God made her that way, and he's brought us together because we're a perfect balance for each other. And so God doesn't make mistakes. It's a lack of education that does the damage. It's not, God didn't just pair you up properly. Did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to make a comment. When John and I were engaged in going through counseling, I think the person who counseled us was really helpful in telling us that, because women, at least me, they just expect the man to know things.
Right.
I mean, this
First
done,
mistake.
Why don't you understand why I feel this way?
Exactly.
You know, whatever.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And he brought up in our counseling that if you need your husband to know something, you need to just come out and tell him, because he's not going to be trying to think about
That.
what it is that you need. And that was just such a big shock
Yeah.
to me.
We're horrible mind readers. We can't do it as a man.
I thought he just knew me so well, he'd just
No.
know.
That's
And
because you're in ecstasy mode.
So that was really helpful.
Yeah,
because,
yeah.
Yes.
I've had to pull on that
Yeah.
several times.
Sure.
And
Well,
it's
he-
really good because John is not an analyzer. He just takes it as it is.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
And-
20
and-
years later, he still has to say to me, just spell it out. I'm not a mind reader. I'm not a mind reader. And I still think he should see it my way. And one of the things you didn't talk about was God has feelings, and they're mentioned throughout the whole Bible. So God is a feeling God, and we're made in his image, and the scriptures are plentiful.
There's lots of scriptures that show that God has feelings, and we're made in his image, and that's why we have feelings. And we have to learn what that means, and we need to learn how to use our feelings properly. Okay, anybody else? Okay,
Go ahead.
one, sure.
As a male and a female, we're given both different special gifts. Us as women,
Eve not see this? As women, we're able to see things and relational, so how is it
Yeah.
she didn't see the snake? How is it she didn't notice that?
Well, because she wanted, remember,
Well,
a
Adam
woman
was with her.
wants to, she gets her
Value and
value and acceptance from being appreciated and valued. And probably in her mind, she was thinking if she ate of this and got smarter, that somehow that would be pleasing to God. Instead of she
Or-
missed the boat
Or
on
even
this.
pleasing to
Or-
Adam,
or even
who was
pleasing to Adam,
standing
yeah.
there with her.
Yeah,
while
he
she's
was there with her,
eating
so.
this apple. So, and then that's an interesting scene
Yeah.
because then he blame shifts.
And that's something else we're going to discuss later on, is that sometimes a wife will please her husband, will do something to please her husband that isn't good
Right.
for either one of them or their relationship. She'll just think, well, if I just do this, then we're going to be okay, when it was really not a good decision to begin with. And so the impulse for a wife to want to please their husband is so strong that sometimes they'll make an unwise decision and do something that will not be good. So but that comes with practice and working this whole thing out. But good question. Anybody else?
Jason.
Okay.
It's just a quick study.
Sure.
To your point of spiritual relations between people and faces and just God's one
Right.
information, but Neurolinguistics Division at UCLA did a study a few years back, and they found out that in the eyes alone, there was over 1,100 different eye
Uh-huh.
patterns that you
Yeah.
would subconsciously realize. Like
Right.
1,100 in just the
Yeah.
eyes.
That's right.
Well, I would think, Jason, since you're in the medical field, that you really grasp what goes on in the body, and then there's this human inside that has feelings, and just that study alone is revelatory. But not everybody doesn't read that type of thing, and so
Yeah.
they don't know.
And this is why it's so important when a wife wants to talk to a husband that he turn the TV off, he puts the newspaper down or whatever he's doing, he turns and faces his wife and look into her eyes when she is wanting to talk to him, so he can see what's really going on here. Okay, remember, you can be watching TV and she's talking and all you're hearing is words, you're not seeing the face. So you got to turn and see what's going on. Okay, thank you for coming again, and we'll see you next time.